Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we're going to look at the road to World War II. Basically, a little short review of some issues that took place before World War II actually started. Most likely, you did cover a few of these things last year. We'll just touch on a few of them that we'll expand upon in class on Thursday, and kind of take a look and see why these things actually took place. So, first thing, they call this the age of dictators. We look about a dictator. Dictator is somebody who has full control over all their land. We see a lot of different examples of this. On Wednesday in class, we talked about Joseph Stalin, kind of a communist, if you will, kind of totalitarian dictator, where all power went to him. You have the idea of fascist dictators, we're going to talk about in class on Thursday, which is kind of a Benito Mussolini right here, and Adolf Hitler over here, being Stalin over here, of course. And last, you have a military dictator, which we see in Japan. Japan was a very militarized country by this time. Military was control. This is Hideki Tojo, who kind of runs as dictator. But each of these guys essentially had full control over their entire country and did everything they could to control a country and expand upon that country. Now, going back to after World War I, they formed a group called the League of Nations. The whole goal of the League of Nations was very, very simple. Try and make sure no more wars happen. It was a very idealized, grandiose plan. Basically, it's supposed to be all countries work together so that makes sure that peace stays in the world. Problem is that it was also very, very ineffective. Basically, they made a few big mistakes. First off, not all countries joined the League of Nations. The United States said, we don't want to be part of it. Germany was not allowed to become part of the League of Nations. Okay? The other thing is that the League of Nations had no real power. This kind of group that's supposed to keep peace in the world, could not enforce anything. Mostly because they had no army. The League of Nations basically said that member countries could volunteer soldiers to go in and maybe stop a country from doing a war or stop a country from doing warlike things, but they were not allowed to force any kind of country to use their army for it. And basically, so if a country said, I don't want my soldiers going there, they didn't have to. And so essentially, the League of Nations, pretty gosh darn ineffective. From this came something called the Kellogg-Briand Pact, though. Essentially, all these countries during this time, 1920, said, we promise that we aren't going to use war as our main method of diplomacy, of international diplomacy anymore. Our main way of working with other countries will not be fighting wars. When we have a disagreement, we're going to try and talk it through instead of fight it through with our armies. Obviously, we see how that works out. Now, we started seeing issues happen already by the time 1931 rolls around. And it starts with Japan, out in a place called Manchuria. The Manchurian Crisis, 1931. Here's Japan. And this land right here is Manchuria. Now, before this, Japan did control Korea. And essentially, we see Japan move in, take over, move this picture here, move in, and take over part of Manchuria, part of China, as a way to procure natural resources. Whole reason for this is that obviously Japan's a pretty small country, didn't have a lot of natural resources available to them, and one of the main goals was to get natural resources here in Manchuria. Now, League of Nations really can't step in because they have no power of negotiations. There's nothing in terms of an army to back them up, so Japan moves in, takes over Manchuria. We have Italy do some things too. Benito Mussolini, Italy, wants to avenge the loss in Ethiopia in the 1890s. When Italy had tried to take over Ethiopia, they lost a huge army in a war. And so they want to get territory. Ethiopia is one of the few African countries still remaining. And so Italy's modern army is sent in to take over Ethiopia. And so basically we see Ethiopia crumble underneath the military strength. You have planes and tanks versus people with old guns from the 1800s and sticks. And basically we see Italy just walk in, take it over. And League of Nations can't do much about it. Hitler starts rearming Germany. Hitler, who had taken over Germany, obviously, you guys know from U.S. history, starts making military equipment. Now, remember, this was part of the things he was not supposed to do in the Treaty of Versailles. But he starts making things like tanks. Not supposed to have them. Starts making the Luftwaffe, also the Air Force. Not supposed to have that either. He starts making Navy that's more than 6 ships with big battleships and submarines. Not supposed to have those either. The biggest of those ships being the famous Bismarck, which at the time was one of the largest battleships in the world. He also starts making a conscripted army that is much, 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 much bigger than 100,000 people allowed. And League of Nations says, well, we really can't stop him, so just let it keep going. And so you kind of see why League of Nations is pretty weak that way too. And eventually he starts moving to the Rhineland. This area here called the Rhineland, where the Rhine River is, was basically the area that he was supposed to stay out of. And Hitler sent troops in there. It was supposed to be demilitarized, and took it over. France says, well, we'll go there, but we don't really want to fight. They say, Hitler, now stop taking over. But no other countries step in because they don't want to put their armies into it. So Hitler comes in, takes over the Rhineland in 1936 as well. Another example of how this whole process worked. Eventually, we have what's called the Axis Pact, of where Germany and Italy in 1936 signed the Axis Agreement, set up their two countries as an ally. In 1940, they add Japan to the mix. And so now we have countries not only making alliances, military alliances, like we saw in World War One, and then obviously countries backed up after that. So then Russia and Russia's got to find an alliance, and you have Great Britain and France sign an alliance, those kind of things, to make sure that if war breaks out, that always needs to be stopped. So also we have alliances taking place again. One of the biggest events too is called the Spanish Civil War. You have two sides in Spain. You have nationalists and you have the popular side. And essentially we have the nationalists led by Francisco Franco, who's a general in the military. He's a fascist, much like Mussolini or Hitler. And you have the other side, which is kind of more supportive of kings and those kind of rulers. And essentially it becomes the practice for World War II. You see Italy and Germany send bombers and troops into Spain to fight on the side of Franco, who's much like they are, wants to become a dictator. And by the end of the war comes around, you see essentially a dictator led by Francisco Franco in Spain. And so it's definitely kind of this dress rehearsal. Even Americans got involved in it. There are Americans called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. It was a group of both white and black Americans who went and fought for the other side in Spain. I went for the non-nationalist side to get ready to kind of try to stop the spread of fascism, stop Germany, stop Italy, stop those kind of things. The big thing we see here is that German army and the Italian army get practice for World War II, while the French and British, so on and so forth, really don't. Eventually, Franco's troops win, and we have a fascist government in Spain that's around till almost the 1980s, 1975, when Franco finally dies. You also see Japan spread into more of China. It's called the invasion of southern China, or the rape of Nanking, because as Japan goes through the huge army of over 1 million people, they beat the Chinese army very, very easily, and their army commits a lot of atrocities. They murder civilians, women, children. Rape happens of women in China, and things made public, but nobody really steps in militarily. Now, the United States cuts off trade, other places cut off diplomacy, but no armies really step in to stop this from taking place because they don't want to commit troops to something like that happened in World War One. Eventually, one of the big things that happened is the Anschluss issue. Basically, Hitler warned Austria because Hitler sees Austria as being German and sees German speakers in Czechoslovakia as being German. They should belong to Germany. Well, Hitler kind of says, join us or else. And so Nazi and Austria decide that they want to give in to Hitler's demands, and Hitler is able to invade Austria without a shot. Remember, this also violates the Treaty of Versailles, saying that Austria and Germany cannot be allied anymore. And basically, the SS, the kind of the super Nazis you actually learned about last year, go into any problems that exist within Austria. Anybody who kind of opposes the idea here, and so you kind of see how this whole dictatorship idea works here a little bit. The other thing is the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland is this little white area of Czechoslovakia right here. Those are German-speaking people. And basically claims are made that German-speaking people are being mistreated in Czechoslovakia, so on and so forth. And Hitler says that should be part of Germany as well, and essentially threatens to invade that region of Czechoslovakia. Countries try to find a stop this expansion, and there's something called a Munich Agreement where Britain, France, and the United States kind of sit down with Hitler and cut a deal, basically saying, well, Hitler, you can have Czechoslovakia, but it's got to stop there. Kind of like when kids are making a fuss in the grocery store and mom says, okay, you can have this, but you got to stop crying. Same kind of thing. They say, fine, Hitler, you can have part of Czechoslovakia, but then you got to stop crying, you got to stop taking over land. In fact, the British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, gets out and says, "We will now have peace in our time. After we made this deal with Hitler, I believe Hitler will stop here." Yeah, he was wrong. And we go from there to eventually Hitler taking all of Czechoslovakia. A lot of the Czechs were not happy about things. And the SS, kind of the super Nazis that you guys should learn about last year, move in and once again remove any potential problems. And it leads us up to the eve of World War II, where in 1939 we see Hitler invade into Poland. That'll be that, guys, kind of lead into World War II. Take your notes on this, please. Bring them back for Thursday. Next notes, we'll kind of go through review World War II again for you. You should have had from last year. We'll talk more about the impacts in Europe and kind of why it happens more than anything. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it very much. These are due on Thursday. Thank you.